I have sat on this bench long enough to know that disrespect does not always arrive loud. Sometimes it comes polished, smiling, and very sure the room will bend before it has to. That was what walked into my courtroom the morning Marcus Webb stood before me. He was 13 years old, thin, restless, and carrying the kind of casual defiance children wear when too many adults have stepped aside instead of standing firm. He had built a following online, mocking neighbors, teachers, and anyone who looked easy to humiliate. He thought attention was power. He thought laughter meant he mattered. His mother, Diane Webb, sat behind him, tired in the face and defensive in the posture. She was not an evil woman. She was an exhausted one. After a painful separation, she had slipped from being Marcus's parent into being his shield. School complaints were overreactions. Neighbor disputes were misunderstandings. 2 earlier incidents had already been quietly settled with money. Every time she paid to make trouble disappear, she taught her son the same lesson. Consequences are negotiable. Then there was Margaret Okafor. Margaret was 74, a retired librarian, widowed, dignified, and steady. Decades earlier, she and her husband Charles had built a remarkable backyard garden, rare plants, cuttings from family in Lagos, flowers collected and cultivated over nearly 40 years. After Charles died, Margaret kept tending it every morning at 6. The garden was not decoration, it was memory. It was grief turned into care. It was a conversation with the man she loved, still continuing in soil and roots. Marcus moved in 2 doors down and began with small cruelty. Basketballs against her fence before sunrise, trash tossed into her beds. Then he found her accent. He filmed her through gaps in the fence, humming or talking softly to herself while she worked, and posted the clips online to make strangers laugh. Margaret complained to Diane. Diane apologized. Nothing changed. Then Marcus crossed the line completely. One night, he climbed the fence with concentrated herbicide, walked through Margaret's garden, sprayed every plant he could reach, and filmed himself doing it. He narrated the whole thing with the smug excitement of a boy who believed destruction was comedy. By morning, the garden was blackened, stems collapsed, soil poisoned. Margaret stepped outside, saw decades of work and memory ruined, and dropped to her knees. She might never have known who did it if Marcus had not posted the video online. 40,000 subscribers watched him laugh while he poisoned a widow's garden. That is why we were in court. Margaret testified first. She brought photographs of the garden before and after, expert estimates, and one picture of Charles kneeling in the soil decades earlier, planting the first roots. She did not dramatize her pain. She did not need to. Truth does not need decoration. When the video played in my courtroom, the room went silent. You could hear Marcus laughing on the recording, pointing the camera at plants that had taken years to grow, joking about how she would react. And while Margaret was speaking, Marcus sat there with one earbud hanging loose, eyes full of boredom, muttering that adults were too dramatic. So I asked him directly whether he understood what he had done. He looked at me and said, "They're just plants. She can buy more. It's not that serious." That sentence told me almost everything. I told him no, they were not just plants. They were years. They were marriage. They were memory. They were pieces of a home and a history no store could restock. Then I told Diane the harder truth. She had not protected her son. She had failed him. Every excuse, every quiet payment, every refusal to force accountability had taught him that other people existed only as scenery for his entertainment. My ruling had to do more than punish. Money alone would teach him nothing. So yes, I awarded Margaret the full damages she requested, but the real sentence was this. Marcus would spend 10 consecutive Saturdays, 40 supervised hours in that garden helping rebuild what he destroyed. No phone, no social media, no camera, just work, dirt, roots, tools, and silence. His YouTube channel would be shut down. Every video involving Margaret removed. He would be barred from all social media for 6 months and attend counseling focused on cruelty, empathy, and harmful online behavior. Diane would enforce every part of it. No more shielding. At first, Marcus hated every second. He showed up angry, quiet, and ashamed in the stupidest way. The kind where a child still thinks his humiliation matters more than the harm he caused. Margaret did not lecture him. She made him work, pull dead roots, turn damaged soil, replant, water carefully, week after week. Then something changed. By the 3rd Saturday, he asked why she cut one branch at an angle instead of straight across. By the 6th, he asked her to teach him a few Yoruba words. By the 9th, he brought a small plant from a nursery and asked where it should go. On the final Saturday, after the mediator signed the completion papers, Marcus stayed another hour and finished a section he had started. Then he turned to Margaret and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand what I was doing. It was not elegant. It was not polished. It was real." That is what people misunderstand about justice. It is not always the loud moment in the courtroom. Sometimes it is the quiet work that comes after, when nobody is clapping and no camera is rolling. Marcus did not need a lecture alone. He needed to sit in the damage he caused and put his own hands to the repair. Diane needed to stop being his excuse. And Margaret, God bless her, chose to teach instead of only condemn. I still think about that case because the garden never became exactly what it was before. Some things do not, but it lived again. And so I think did something in that boy that might have hardened permanently if nobody had finally told him the truth and made him stay long enough to hear it.